Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, a Travel Podcast.
I'm Darcy, and this is Nathaniel.
Hello again, everyone. Sorry we were gone for so long.
So long we were gone.
6 months, I think.
Was it that long?
I think it's November is the last episode we put out.
Oh, we left you guys hanging.
We left you guys hanging. We went to the States, and then we came back to Italy, and then we kind of got bogged down with a bunch of work, and then we went back to the States again, spur of the moment. And now we're back again. But because we are headed to Rome in about a month, we figured we should, start putting out podcasts again.
Yeah, we really should. We're far behind.
And we realized there are a number of you listening to these, which we appreciate it very, very much. So thank you, everybody, for, listening and listening to what we say. It's very exciting.
That's Nathaniel's favorite thing.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's a lot of people's favorite things. Maybe I shouldn't poke fun at you.
Well, that's fine. So moving past that attack on my personal character, we're going to talk about gelato this episode because we meant to do that a while ago.
But we're coming into gelato season, so I think this is a perfect time to talk about it.
It is. It's. I think especially in the smaller towns, it's gelato. It's coming into gelato season.
Mm-hmm. Springtime.
Yeah. And some places are already open for gelato. Some places not yet. They are. There's still, I think in the winter, they mostly do chocolate and panettone.
Little cakes and pastries and things.
Yeah. And then as it warms up, they start selling gelato. Some bigger cities, Rome, will have some places that are open just year round. Yeah. So if you do happen to visit Rome in the winter or something like that, fall, you shouldn't have too much of an issue finding gelato. But we wanted to make you guys just total, professional gelato eating, really, critical of the gelato you're eating, sort of people, tourists, voyagers, travelers. And we thought this episode might help. I will take the calories for you. And I did all that research. And this is now,
Yeah, you've taken on a big burden for everybody listening.
A huge burden. I've put all of my future, health into this episode. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. But first, we're going to take a very, very quick ad break where you're going to hear my voice advertising Anchor. And when we get back, we are going to talk about, well, first off, what is gelato? So stay tuned. Welcome back from hearing my voice to hearing my voice. We're going to first talk about what is gelato. And I think it's just because I think there's a lot of confusion, possibly. I always thought it's a very decadent, right?
Yeah. Did you think it was just ice cream?
Well, no, I thought it was ice cream, but I thought it had a higher, I thought it was more fatty maybe, or maybe it was more sugary or something like that. So a quick Google search will tell you that gelato actually has a lower fat content than ice cream, American ice cream. So it's essentially, same thing, but lower fat content, less cream, less eggs, more milk. Mm-hmm. And all this means is gelato's typically softer. You can actually even tell because usually they'll serve gelato with a paddle rather than a scoop, like an ice cream scoop.
I mean, I feel like you can take a bite out of ice cream. You can't really take a bite out of gelato.
Kind of like soft, like the sort of softy, Mr. Softy soft serve, like a step up, a little bit harder than that, but very similar consistency. And because of that, I mean, we'll get into it a little later, but it does melt a lot quicker.
It almost, though, is like an old-fashioned custard, even though it has a lower egg content.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I think so. If you're looking for something to bite into as far as a dessert, you might be not wanting a gelato, or as we're going to talk about a little later, hard gelatos. Mm-hmm. But first, there are 3 parts of the gelato.
Yeah, I think we should start with the cone.
Start with the cone.
Let's start at the bottom. So something to look out for with gelato is that most gelatos are served in a waffle cone, which for an American, I mean, I'm always like, whoa. A waffle cone? That's like $5 extra. Yeah. But it's standard here. And a lot of the time it's made in house.
Sure.
Sometimes it's not, but it's made with quality ingredients and, really well.
I would almost say not almost, I would actually say it adds to the gelato experience rather than detracts from what it's part of it's expected to obviously eat the cone, not just sort of eat the ice cream and then toss away the cone because
it's not just a conveyor for the gelato.
Right.
It's a whole nother, it's crunchy and it's yummy and it's sugary sometimes, but not overly sweet. And it's just really nice.
And I think part of it is they are hard. I mean, like sometimes waffle cones are a little soft, a little squishy, they're a little weird. They get saturated very quickly. Waffle cones pretty much kind of keep that consistency, that hard consistency throughout the gelato eating experience. So you're not left with a mess of soggy wet cone.
Yeah.
And I think I do want to just throw in, since we're talking about the cone, some gelato shops, we'll mention one of them, actually will put sort of liquid warm chocolate at the bottom of the cone, either dark chocolate or white chocolate. And it's kind of just, I don't know, gives a little extra to the experience. Sometimes the chocolate's kind of not congealed, I guess, not quite frozen, like it's hardened.
It hardens a little bit.
Yeah.
I think there's like those, we have them in the States. You like the little freezer, they're like cornetto, cone thingy. Anyways, little chocolate triangle.
And they're like chocolate on the inside kind of thing. And some gelato shops will do that as a little extra fun bit, which is always an exciting little touch, I think. So working up from the cone, and I guess maybe the last thing you mentioned is that is a real, and we'll talk about this again a little later too, because we'll kind of put all our thoughts in one spot, but the cone is one of the like kind of canary in the coal mines.
It is. That's a very good
gelato. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like if you see people coming out with a sugar cone,
like one of those little store-bought sugar cones that's like, oh, it's fun when you're 5 and you got it from Kroger, you know.
Wow, she just hates the sugar cone. Okay,
I don't like the sugar cones.
So moving on, do you want to talk about gelato next, or the panna?
We should work up. We should talk about gelato.
Let's talk about gelato.
Get to the
I was gonna say get to the meat of the product, but there's no meat, thankfully.
No meat.
So
it's just gelato.
So we've already mentioned the fact that gelato is a lower fat content. It does, and I mentioned very briefly, but it does. In theory, you're eating this in the summer,
right? And
it can be hot in Rome. If you're an American, we're talking 95, 100-degree days. They're rare, but not that rare. 95 is a lot more common. So it can get pretty hot. And this is to say that it's also, I mean, what is like two-thirds of stores in Rome don't have AC, maybe more.
Yes.
And it's going to be even more if you are going to go this summer, we're talking 2022. The sort of current
global situation.
Especially Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
Italy's been put on this sort of thing where like they're asking people either to not use AC or keep it very warm in their house, as to not use gas, because that's what Italy gets most of its power from.
Right.
So already very few places use AC. So this might even be fewer places using AC. That is all to say that you can kind of tell when they're scooping out the gelato sometimes is already really soft. And it might not last in the sun, let alone,
Well, gelato's the thing that it's kind of very Italian in that way. You get it and then you eat it immediately. It's not a walking around activity. You know, you eat it, you take it maybe outside the shop, you stand right in front of the shop and you eat your gelato.
And that's very common. I mean, I think every shop will have people standing in front, mostly Italians. It's not it really isn't a walking thing. Like I think America's very like taking ice cream and walk around.
Which is good though, because I think we talked about in a previous episode, enjoying eating your food, enjoying what you're eating. And it really puts you in that moment and makes you enjoy everything that's happening and all the flavors and all the wonderful gelato-ness of that moment.
Yeah. And no, that's absolutely true. I think it does kind of go back to that sort of reminding you to enjoy where you are. And I think that's like, the whole episode's on gelato, so we're going to talk about flavors and things like that and what to look out for. But we just wanted to sort of break down the cone. Because that third and final piece is the panna, or the whipped cream on top. Yeah.
And it's amazing. And it's just like this perfect little like crown on top of the queen that is gelato.
And it's like a, I don't know, it kind of caps it all off. Most places, in our experience, will go ahead and charge you for the ice cream and the gelato, the gelato and the panna, and that's already incorporated in the price. So you can ask for no panna, but I don't believe they'll give you your 50 cents back. So you might as well get it.
Well, in Rome, panna, the cream on top, it's fluffy whipped cream, it's amazing, is pretty standard. Some places in the South where we live, it's not as typical. You get the gelato, which is wonderful. No complaints.
In that vein, cream is not very common in the South in cooking or in anything.
Good point.
So
very good point. We're farther away from France.
Yeah.
It's much more, olive oil country down here.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, we are like the thing is there's so many things to keep out your eyes out for, I guess, to look out for. Number one being is it a machine or is it coming out of the same tub as the gelato's in?
Right.
That's a big one. It's some places will use these little machines. It's almost like if you've ever been to the barber shop and there's that little like what is it? The shaving cream machine? Like, okay, so I don't know if you've been to a barber shop.
I have not apparently been to this
So
kind
there's
of
these
barber
little
shop.
like machines, right? And you kind of, they have this little button and you stick it under it and it pushes out
And
these
it pushes out shaving cream?
Yeah, and they put it on their hand and then they
What?
just smack on your face or the back of your neck, where it is. Yeah, so it's the
I
same
need to go
kind
get
of...
a shave.
You
This is
do.
amazing.
You should experience this. So if you've experienced that, it's a similar thing, except it's with whipped cream. Now I've just ruined it for everybody. And it's not bad. I will say sometimes it's real cream and sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that, but it's...
I mean, it's still whipped cream.
Yeah.
I'll eat Cool Whip. You
Right,
know, I'm
yeah.
not too bougie to eat Cool Whip.
To
Not
Cool
that
Whip.
this is what it is. So, you know, when you have fresh panna out of a machine, it's still
nice. But
fresh
most of the good places, because it is one of those things going back to the cone, it's like if you have really, really, really good gelato, like artisanal, local ingredients, fresh ingredients, best of the world of the ingredients, and then you put in a sugar cone with pre-made, you know, cream, it's sort of like, well,
Yeah.
you've just ruined this. You could have put it in a bowl and it would have been more enjoyable because then it doesn't dilute the flavor. So it's the kind of, there are, and I will talk about this again, it's all in steps.
Yes.
But there are these tubs that the gelatos are served. The gelato is like sort of served from. And the better stores will have the cream in one of those tubs. And they just open up and like kind of basically give you a little scoop on top, like a little...
It's like a little
schmear.
Schmear. It is.
Yeah.
It's like a little fluffy schmear.
It's like a little schmear on top. And that's a big thing to keep in mind. It's also, if you're somebody who's just like, I don't really want that much sugar, this, that, a lot of the panna will be unsweetened. It's just pure cream flavor. And sometimes that's really, really nice though, because it is, if they're using really high quality ingredients, if they're using well-sourced ingredients, you're kind of getting like that, almost that flavor of a raw ingredient on top of your, you know, if it's like, you kind of get that flavor of like, oh, would have been the panna they used inside of the gelato. So you kind of are tasting that extra, I don't know, rawness, if you will.
Absolutely.
I think the only other thing to keep to consider is that if you've had sort of like, I don't know, whipped cream or something like that before, frozen whipped cream, I don't know if you know this, but if you whip cream, like, you know, from by hand, you can stick it in the freezer and it's usually okay. You know, it's like it doesn't lose its shape. But when they put the whipped cream on top of the gelato, sometimes, especially if it's a little cooler, the whipped cream begins to freeze to the gelato and it almost gets not crunchy, but like chunky.
Yeah,
I don't want to say
can't think of a
chunky
good
cream.
I was gonna say congealed, but that's also a terrible word
right.
for it because it's not bad.
No.
It's just a different consistency because its temperature changes.
Yeah, and as you eat it, basically as the cream is in your mouth and the gelato's in your mouth, it will sort of freeze the whipped cream to the top of your mouth, and you can kind of tell because sometimes the really good whipped creams, it almost feels like you kind of ate butter, basically. Like,
yeah, it just coats the top of your mouth.
it coats the top of your mouth rather than oily.
I don't love that, but
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean that it's a bad ingredient.
It's just a weird mouth feel on top of the
Sometimes,
gelato.
yes.
Yeah, which is something to paint. It's not that something went bad or that
Right.
you're eating something bad. It's just if you don't like that feel, definitely consider not having.
Well, it doesn't happen at every place. It's just,
That's true.
I mean, there's different fat contents in different creams. Just depends on the shop that's making it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So back to the gelato, because that is the
Always back to the gelato
Always
with
back
you.
to the
It
gelato.
is the point of this episode, I guess.
and it is. So let's talk about things to look for in a gelato shop.
And things to look for when you see people walking down the street holding gelato in
Right.
order to find that shop.
That's a big one too. And I think we mentioned this in I want to say in the food and drink or maybe the
we
restaurant, but it's like, we're very big on these sort of, if you see people walking with food or drink that looks good, sort of tracking them down and seeing where they got it from. And that's part of, I think with gelatos the same way, it's sort of we'll sort of ignore, when we see people with gelato, if it looks certain ways, which we're going to describe in a second, we'll ignore it. Or we'll be like, that looks amazing. We have to go find that place.
I think you and I get a little crazy though, because we'll be like, oh, they're walking with it. How much is it melted onto them?
Yeah.
Who's eating it? Is it the kids or the adults? Who's finished it?
Yeah.
You know, so
That's a
that you
big
can
thing.
find exactly where it came from.
That's a huge thing. It's also, I think, with us, it sounds a little, ridiculous, but you can't, eat gelato all the time. It's sort of like you really are capped at like 2 a day. Like they are a bit heavy. Maybe 3 a day if you're feeling it, if you're pushing it.
I think when we first came to Italy, we were eating way too much gelato.
100%.
So it was like 3 a day sometimes.
Yeah.
There was no cap on the amount of gelato that we were eating. But we've really tried to pull back and only eat what we think we'll love.
Yeah. Something that we think will be, I keep mentioning this, but again, like good ingredients, well-sourced ingredients, well-made. I think it's the same thing. I guess when you're at home, so to speak, you kind of like, I'll have the Breyers tonight. I don't have to have the nice ice cream. It's fine. But I think it's like when you're traveling, and the reason I say this actually is because in Rome, almost all gelato is the same price. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the episode. But it's not about like spending a little less and still getting the gelato experience. Almost all gelato costs exactly the same. So the only thing that's changing is the quality. And of course, whether or not you're willing to wait in a line, if there is a line, things like that.
Or locations sometimes, things like that. But there really aren't that many barriers to getting an amazing cone of gelato.
Absolutely. So the first thing that we look for, I guess actually let's just start like going down the street. Like if we see people going down the street.
I look for the color of ice cream.
The color of ice cream is a really important one.
I shouldn't say ice cream. It's gelato. Oof. I broke the number one rule.
Yeah. People will correct you. People have corrected us. We're a little too casual and we're like, we can get some ice cream. And they're like, actually, it's gelato. I'm like, okay, we'll get a gelato today.
So we look for the color of the gelato.
Yeah. So what this refers to is basically whether or not they're using artificial coloring.
Right.
That's a big one. There's a going back to the canary in the coal mines of gelatos being the cone. Pistachio is another really good sort of metric.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to tell if they're using added dyes and possibly added food. What am I trying to say?
Coloring?
Added flavors.
Flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is actually added flavors is a big one that ties into that. And pistachio gelato should be light brown.
Yeah, it's a lovely light brown, maybe ever so slightly green.
Yeah,
but light brown.
But very much light brown. So if it is green, it's been flavored. Colored and possibly flavored.
If you look at the pistachio ice cream and you think that's green, green comes to mind. It's probably been artificially colored.
Yeah, and that's a big one because, there's a lot of purists, especially in Rome, when it comes to gelato. It is, it's sort of has a lot of gelato and it's a big scene. And I think a lot of purists are basically into that sort of idea that pistachio gelato should be a light brown, a tan, that sort of beige look. There's a range there for sure. Mm-hmm. And again, it can almost be green, green into the right color. But ground up pistachios should be apparently brown.
Well, they're a nut, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Basically, when you're looking at gelato, aside from sorbet, when you're looking at the gelatos, they're really all going to be sort of a lovely muted color. Mm-hmm. Because that's what happens when you mix things with milk and use natural ingredients. They're just not going to be brightly colored. Yeah. The sorbetto will likely be a bright color. It's fresh fruit and no dairy.
And water usually, sugar. That especially like that can sometimes throw people, obviously. Lemon ice cream is white, just so we're clear. Yes. Lemon gelato, lemon sorbet, it's white. It's not yellow. If it's yellow, that's terrible. But almost every shop will have a lemon sorbetto, and it's white. Mm-hmm. They'll have a kind of a fragola. We'll talk about the flavors in a minute. But those will be a little
brightly
bit more,
colored.
Brightly colored.
Yeah.
But it can be a little bit hard looking at the colors because one of the other things to look for is how the gelato is presented. Mm-hmm. It's for a lot of tourists, and I don't mean to speak ill of tourists or these shops, but it's presented in a way it's
in the shop. You mean
in the shop?
Yeah.
It's sort of mounded up in these sort of silver trays.
So it's sort of like a rectangular tub.
Yeah, and it usually has like fruit on it or something, or maybe it's usually it's the ingredient that's in the gelato will be on top.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like a lovely. To be fair, they're quite pretty.
Gorgeous.
It's like a mountain of whatever your flavor is, and then some of the sort of raw ingredients sprinkled on top. So it is beautiful.
Yeah.
The presentation is lovely, often, but sometimes it will be just kind of like a mountain of like, they clearly got it from a bucket, smashed it into this rectangular tub, and made this like mishmash of gelato in its little flavor cube.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something to part of the reason is to look out for is, again, it's sort of like, it's a sign of it being kind of factory produced rather than artisanal, homemade, whatever you want to call it, like small batch, that kind of thing.
Right.
Again, so it can be hard because the good places, not all of them, but a typical sign of this will be a decent quality place or even a good quality place is that the gelato is kind of in silver tubs with a lid.
It almost looks like an ice bucket, I feel like.
Yeah, it almost looks like an ice
it'll
bucket.
be set into a tray. So,
more near a counter.
yeah, it's in the gelato counter, so it's set in, so you can't necessarily tell that it looks like an ice bucket, but that's the general shape. So you'll just see the little silver round lids set into this gelato counter. And
they sometimes will have the flavors sort of kind of written on a card right in front of it. And some places will have it on a board kind of behind the servers, behind the counter, behind all of that, usually up high so everyone can see it. Sometimes it'll be English and Italian. Usually the good ones are just Italian. And it can be a little bit confusing because if you don't know, I mean, I'm saying like some flavors are pretty much the same in English as it is in Italian, just limone for lemon, things like that. Ricotta is ricotta, as we have in English, pera, pear. And then there's a lot more of like fragola is strawberry. So there's like, okay.
But I mean, if you're going to be in Rome, almost certainly,
yeah.
almost certainly, the people running the shop will speak English.
Right.
So don't be afraid to ask.
I think now that COVID is, Italy is slowly coming out of its COVID sort of mindset, for lack of a better word. Like it's sort of, we just recently got the ability to have masks off inside some places, which is very big. We were just in America, like I mentioned, and no one had a mask on anywhere. It was really wild, the difference. But with that being said, they did pause the free tasting, basically, during COVID. But I think now that if they're trying to kind of lessen these, these sort of
restrictions. But in a safe way, obviously.
Yeah. So you should be able to ask for, you've always been able to ask for tastes. Hopefully, if you do come this summer, you'll be able to ask for flavors or for tastes of the flavors as well, because, you want to taste what you're getting, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think, so like we have basically coloring. You can't really tell with the flavoring, artificial flavoring. Sometimes even good places will use artificial flavoring. It's just impossible to tell.
But the fake color is usually a good indication of whether it's going to taste fake.
Yeah. Then there's obviously if you how the gelato is served. We've talked about the waffle cone already as well. It's like, especially if you're like just looking for it, but that's another one we look for if someone's walking down the street. We do try to see, are they holding a waffle cone? Are they holding a sugar cone?
And that's pretty rare. It's rare that someone's holding a sugar cone, but you obviously can tell the difference. And, you can gain a keen eye and figure out which waffle cones really look really like they're going to taste really good too.
Yeah. Rather than just be
kind of,
Yeah. And the last one is the cream, and you won't know this, but the last one is the cream, the panna. They should give it to you for free. And again, we'll talk about the price and stuff in a little bit, but if they charge you or if they say, oh, it's 50 cents or it's €1 for the cream, that to me is kind of like a little bit, doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It almost seems like, oh, if they're nickel and diming you over certain things, then it might not be the best place.
And if you find that out after you've purchased your gelato, don't let it ruin your experience.
Right. No, of course.
But if that's something that you know beforehand, it might just be like a little tip off that it's not the best choice.
Yeah. So do you want to I think from here, now that you know what to look for, what to not look for, I think it's a good idea to talk about like flavors really quickly.
Let's talk about flavors.
All right, let's do it. So what are some typical flavors we could find?
Fior di latte is kind of like the first one that comes to mind, because in the US we have vanilla standard, right?
Right.
Not standard here. Fior di latte, which is cheese, but don't let that throw you off. Keep listening. It is, I think, a pretty standard, what I would think of as, it's not vanilla, but it is like a basic, lovely, it's got a milk flavor.
Yeah.
I don't think of it as cheese tasting.
I think that's kind of like, that's where like a lot of countries that produce cheese have like that sort of young cheeses, new cheeses, and then old aged cheeses. And so when you get a pizza in a lot of Italy, in America you put mozzarella on it, and in Italy you put fior di latte on it, which is really just, it's almost like it's just been turned into cheese. So it still pretty much just tastes like milk melted onto pizza, which is what mozzarella kind of tastes like.
To be fair, there is mozzarella on pizza here as well.
But it's more of a specific, like bufala mozzarella or something like that. So they think fior di latte is, I mean, you can get it at a cheese store right next to like the mozzarella and the stracciatella and things like that, which brings us to our next very popular flavor, which is stracciatella. We're gonna not exactly pronounce all these right, by the way. It's a little bit more difficult to switch between English and Italian.
Yes, especially after being away in the U.S. for so long.
Stracciatella. And that is, so when you go into a gelato shop, and if you can see the gelato, that is going to be the one that looks like chocolate chip ice cream. I think is a good way to put it. It's a great way to put it, actually. It's got, almost always, it's going to be white ice cream with little chunks of chocolate in it, like chocolate chips. Sometimes it's like chocolate swirled into it, and then that chocolate's frozen, so it's...
Or like chocolate shavings.
Chocolate shavings.
Yeah.
But stracciatella is another cheese, and that one is ever so slightly more cheesy. But like, if you thought butter more than cheese, you'd be more on the right track. Because there's like a...
If you're someone who dislikes cheese, I would say you should try it.
Yeah.
You might really like it. If you're someone who hates cheese, maybe go with a different flavor.
Yeah, maybe avoid the stracciatella.
But if you're like, I don't really like cheese and ice cream, that sounds weird, try it. Because it does not taste like cheese.
Yeah. And there is also like latte, which is, milk. It's just very, very straight. Just
basic,
Sometimes it's called panna instead. It'll just be cream flavored gelato. And these are no, like, again, it's just sweet cream is another one. But that's kind of the closest you'll get. There is vanilla, but it's not a typical flavor. A lot of the tourist places will have a vanilla, but sometimes the artisanal places won't have a vanilla.
It's pretty rare.
It's because it's again, the artisanal places, I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but trying to source well ingredients, and vanilla beans are very difficult to source if not through like slave labor. Fair trade is kind of, it's difficult to get fair trade, or expensive to get fair trade vanilla, and to use real vanilla. So it's a lot of places it's not worth it to basically produce vanilla gelato in the kind of quantities that they need to still make a profit. But there are a variety of nut flavored gelatos.
Pistachio.
Pistachio.
Great one. We've talked about that. Nocciola.
Nocciola, which is hazelnut.
Hazelnut. Thank you. I could not think of the English word for that.
Those are really popular. Almost everybody has pistachio and nocciola.
Again, very standard flavors.
Sometimes they get a little bit. You can get a little kind of crazy, like nocci, which is walnut. You'll sometimes see, because there's a walnut season here, and sometimes they'll, do something fun with those. You can sometimes get an almond one, but usually it's almond and something else. Almond and chocolate, almond and orange. It's not just almond by itself. I think there are a few other nut ones. They're rarely, though, I will say, for everyone who does not eat milk, there will be a nut sorbet. Thank you. And they try, basically it's like nut milk, and then rather than water, it's the nut milk basically, and then the flavor, quote unquote.
It's lovely.
It is. They're really quite lovely. They're more icy, obviously, but they're really quite lovely. And those are kind of the standard. Cioccolato, of course. I can't believe I missed cioccolato.
Chocolate, obviously. And then there's it'll say fondente, or will it just say cioccolato fondente? Sometimes it'll just say fondente, which will look like the word fondant.
Yeah.
If you know about cakes or whatever. But that just means dark chocolate, and sometimes that will mean that there is less milk less dairy in that, and then just kind of like sometimes it's just like a nice, heavy, dark chocolate dense thing. It's really nice.
I think I could be wrong, but I think sometimes they'll just do chocolate and eggs and sugar. And I mean, it's heavy. But if you are slightly susceptible to lactose, you can have eggs obviously, but not milk. Then that is an option if you're okay with something dark and heavy, because
it still has some milk in it, to be clear.
Yes, no, yeah, but it's a classic combination to mix that with like the raspberry sorbet. And then of course, I mean, there are other flavors that are classic. But it's just one of those things that it's like if a place only has a few flavors, that is it's like cheese-based, nut-based chocolate. There are a couple of flavors in there. I mean, everybody has like a Kinder flavor, I mean, especially the even the artisanal ones sometimes will try to recreate like the Kinder.
Or like Nutella.
Or Nutella is a big one. Yeah.
I mean, it's also a classic flavor though. It's hazelnut and chocolate.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's amazing. So if you like that, you'll love it.
Should we talk about sorbet flavors?
Yeah. So if you don't eat dairy, I guess.
And there's some pretty standard sorbet flavors.
There are, absolutely. And to clarify, I think ask just to be safe. But at the artisanal places, the sorbet is not made with dairy at all. So if you...
But definitely ask. We're all about being really careful about allergies.
Yeah. And so are they. They'll ask you to ask. But if it's a hot day and you don't want milk in your stomach, or if you can't have milk, there's always at least 2 sorbets. Most places will do at least 4 sorbets.
So
limone, classic lemon.
Lovely, amazing.
Should be white, again, to clarify.
Yes. Fragola.
Strawberry. Yeah.
I think some of these are the ones that you might not recognize, like on the flavor board, if they're all written in Italian. So fragola, strawberry.
Yeah. Lampone,
raspberry.
Yeah.
What's another one?
I think in our experience it does sort of not veer from there, but then it does go into like some places have a mango, which is mango.
Yeah, I feel like that's becoming more typical.
Popular. Yeah. And it's also it's fun because I like lemon, but it's a little bit icy. Fragola and lampone are strawberry and raspberry the same. They're a little bit icy, but mango is really creamy.
You find them icy? I don't find them icy. Okay. I find lemon a little bit icy sometimes, but like, I don't know. I find a lot of the sorbets creamy, even though they don't have any dairy.
That is good to know. And that is actually, we didn't mention this, but it's because it's slower churned than ice cream. So I'm glad we got it in now before the episode's over. But that's good to know, because so if you are looking for a sorbet, you have 2 different, I guess, experiences here. So maybe icy, maybe not, but definitely try them. There's also like a lot of places, artisanal especially, love to do, and I think this is a good way to kind of segue into the crazy flavors we found kind of thing, but like they really like to do a seasonal. It's a little bit more difficult, I would say, to do a seasonal gelato than a sorbetto, because there's not a lot of fruit gelato in our experience.
That's fair. Yeah.
There's really not like... I think it's a lot of the fruit stuff, which, I mean, the reason I say fruit because it's in season. Obviously, hazelnut has a season as well and things like that, but they store for a while, and you can pretty much always find them year round. But, certain things you can only find, obviously, in season, especially if you're trying to source them directly from a farm. So in that sense, they'll kind of like more, more, which is blackberry. That's kind of a popular one. We've had one that was like cucumber and like pepper or something like that.
Yeah, it was so good. I think that's probably my favorite. It wasn't the best gelato I've ever eaten, but I loved it because it was so weird and still good. Yeah. To be fair, I mean, it wasn't like disgusting or anything. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think because people get creative, and cherry is a really chilega.
I'm feeling like I remember like an almond cherry amarena something flavor.
I think there is, or at least an amaretto or something like that.
Yeah.
There is. Now we sound like we don't know what we're talking about. I promise we know exactly.
I know. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of a very specific flavor that I had that I thought was really good.
There was also one. Again, some places get creative. I'm sounding like such a purist. I don't love when people do fall flavors in the summer. But we had one that was really good, and it was like a albicocca.
Cinnamon one?
Oh, that was really good. I was thinking albicocca, and like it was almost like squash or pumpkin with apricot or something.
Yes,
it was really
it
like
had nuts in it or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
That was good.
So if you're looking to kind of if you're okay with being creative, if you're okay like not having standard flavors, I mean there is a lot out there for you, and some flavors. So actually going back just to gelato, if you're into cheese, some places will get creative and do like a well, not necessarily Parmesan because it is Rome after all, but Pecorino Romano. So it's a sheep's milk grating cheese typically. Some places will do a Pecorino Romano gelato, and we really liked it.
It is sheepy though.
Yeah, it's really it was amazing for the first bite, and it took a minute to finish that last bite. It was like, wow, that's just cheese.
Because so far from the Fiore di Latte, it's definitely tastes like cheese.
Yeah, that one's significantly cheesy.
Yeah.
But there's we'll talk about specific places in a second, but some have like their own signature flavors. We've had like I think it's like a cinnamon milk, horchata basically. That was quite lovely. We've had a few I think the part of it is like there are a number of different standard flavors that are not like standard than say in a one ingredient. Just in the sense that a lot of places will have like amarena, which is the sour cherries with sort of milk, basically. That flavor, so it'll just kind of be white ice cream with amarena in it. We've already mentioned Nutella, but if you don't find Nutella, because it is a brand name, obviously there is Gianduja. Darcy's got it. What's up? Gianduja. And that is the same thing. It's chocolate, hazelnuts, sugar, but it's sort of it's the name for the product that Nutella is the brand name for, if that makes sense. So if you don't find Nutella, if you really like Nutella, this is the sort of traditional name for it. And just like a quick word on ingredients, because I kept talking about it earlier, but I wanted to just sort of maybe do a little quick mention, is that we do look for places that, gelato shops that do source the ingredients really, really well. And one of our favorites, and we can actually maybe go into talking about locations now, but they get their milk from like the Piemonte region. They get, their sugar is all fair trade. It's all like it's called like Parisi eggs. They have, pistachios from Afghanistan. They do it's all like wherever the place for this ingredient is where they get that ingredient. Which it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know if it really changes the flavor. I know I sound like such a sacrilegious person, because obviously Sicily has pistachios, and Sicily has almonds, and
well, there also are places that do emphasis on local. So they'll do we got our eggs from down the street, or they only have ingredients that you can find locally or at least in Italy. So I think both are great options. That it shows that they take care in what they're making.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the thing, and it's only something that it's part of us, like also the reason we go to these places is sort of it's the whole vote with your wallet thing. It's a sort of, you have my money because I want you to keep doing this. I want you to keep supporting small farmers. I want you to keep using kilometer zero is a big thing that now it's taking off more and more in Italy, but it's trying to source your ingredients locally, like in theory from within 1 kilometer. I don't know why it's called kilometer zero. I guess it's within 0 kilometers, but I don't know if that's possible. But and Rome is difficult. Rome's impossible because there's nothing that grows in Rome, so you have to get it from outside of Rome. But there is a big push to sort of to find ingredients that are local. And we always notice too, because we live in the South and where things here are very common, like mozzarella di bufala, which is mozzarella from the buffaloes, or even like olives from Gaeta, or
broccoli from our neighbor. Three doors down.
Right. Well, I was thinking more like even like things that are specialties regions.
Oh yes.
But then you go to Rome and you can only find it in a specialty store.
Right.
Like nobody sells Gaeta olives. It's like you have to go to like the very specific place. They have their own specialties, obviously, to clarify. But it's, if they don't grow castagna or chestnuts outside of Rome, then they might not do a chestnut ice cream. So those are just, basically, if you care about the ingredients, if that's something that does concern you, I would recommend looking for the places that are clear about where they source their ingredients, and bringing us to our list of gelato places. And I will put this in the comments because I want to drop you a a Google Map pin. But first, let's have an ad break if you don't mind, and then when we get back, we'll start the list.
Welcome back. So let's talk about the specific places in Rome that we really like getting gelato from.
Let's do it. Do you have a favorite place that you like gelato from?
I do. Do you have a favorite place? I think we should say them on 3.
Okay.
Okay.
You have to do 1, 2, 3?
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Neve di Latte.
Otaleg.
Ooh, Otaleg. Okay.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Very interesting.
They're my favorite. They're the ones who did the cucumber and pepper thing, which is weird, and I love it. And their name is gelato backwards.
Yeah, their name is gelato backwards. They also did the one though with the apricot pumpkin.
Yeah,
apricot squash one.
They're so inventive, and I just think it's interesting.
Otaleg is, I think, one of the more inventive ones that we've ever been to. They are. I mean, you just heard the cucumber, you heard the pumpkin. They always have a few flavors that are just wild. Their normal flavors are very, very good, to clarify.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Phenomenal. But I like, they are creative. They like to kind of push the boundaries, basically, a little bit. That one, and we'll put just, again, links and locations in the description. That one's in Trastevere, though, which is, if you ever go through Trastevere, it's a nice little area. This is a little bit outside of it. In still a nice area, but less sort of touristy, maybe is a good way to put it.
It's got kind of like a neighborhood feel.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. It's very neighborhoody.
Even though the Otaleg, though, is very sort of like, their interior is like black, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I would call it like upscale looking at first glance.
Yeah, even though we've actually never been inside, because during COVID. They've stopped people from going inside, and they set up a little stand. So you had to go and order it, and they'd come.
But you can
outside.
still look at the restaurant.
Yeah, you can still
just
look
from the doorway.
That one is good, and actually that one is, so that's in Trastevere-ish. That one is just down the street, more or less. It's maybe a 4 or 5 minute walk from another one we like called Fatamorgana,
which is a small chain, right?
It is a small chain. I think it's like Rome chain.
Yeah.
That one is a small chain, and that one's also really good. It's
lovely.
That is where we had, I believe, the cheesy one. The
it is. Yes. The
pecorino romano we had there.
They are also inventive, but they obviously have standard flavors too.
They're good. My only fear, I think, if I can say that, is it's sort of like when you go to a restaurant and it's like a 16-page menu, and you're like, there's no way you do this all well. Fatamorgana I love, but they do have a lot of flavors.
Very good point.
And it does make me sort of doubt, not necessarily if they even do it all well, but how fresh it is. Because that's the big thing. I mean, a lot of Italians that we know like to get the standard flavors because those are the ones that are constantly being made. They're not, spending days in the freezer and then days out and then days in the freezer, which sort of just destroys the quality of it. So if you have 30 or 35 flavors, it does make me sort of wonder, like, has this been sitting around a while? Is this kind of old? Is it freezer burned? Which, I want to say definitely go there. It's like on our top 5 list.
This is all conjecture, by the way.
All conjecture. We had a lovely experience. It's just more of like my fear going in. And there's a few of those around, which is nice because it's consistency and quality all over the city. It's rather than just the one. Some places are only one location. Which one do we talk about next?
I want to talk about Neve di Latte. That's your favorite.
That's my favorite. Yeah,
and that's the one that they will advertise. Where they got their specific ingredients, right?
Yeah,
they're very clear about it. I should say
they have a little so in their. They actually don't serve theirs out of little tubs. They make it so you can see the gelato, and they have those little cards basically with the flavor, but they have a little thing of like where the flavor came from. So they try to be more transparent about where they source their ingredients. And also though, I believe either we read somewhere, they have a little bit of a pamphlet at their shops talking about their ingredients. And it basically says, we don't have all of our flavors all the time because
it's not in season.
It's either not in season or, even simple things like if there's a shipping issue or something like that. Right. Like I mentioned, their pistachios are, they're supposed to be Afghani pistachios from Afghanistan, I believe. So I guess if you can't get them, then either,
they don't have that flavor.
Unless they decide to go with a different
supplier. Yeah.
So that's but I really like them. They are in the Ponte Milvio, Flaminio area.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
they're kind of like right next to Maxi, which is like a modern art sort of contemporary art museum.
Yeah. near the river, which is not near enough to like go walk along the river, by the way. I mean, it's near, but like your ice cream melted.
Yes, eat the ice cream outside of the gelato shop.
It's unfortunately, I gotta be honest, I love Neve di Latte, but it's not like the most amazing setting. It's sort of like there's a tram route right in front of it. It's near the there's a tram stop and bus station, Mancini, which is just down the street from it. So it's a little bit busy, but it's not the end of the world. I think it's totally fine.
I mean, it might mean that you can get to it easily if you're not staying near there.
And that's that's the huge thing. It's that one is it because it literally is at the destination of 20 buses, 30 buses, and 2 tram lines, or at least 1 tram line, excuse me. But they have a couple of trams running, so you can always get it. It's easy to get to, and it's right at the end of the line, so you can't miss it really. But that one's my favorite if I had to choose like one place.
Yeah.
So what else on the list? We have I Caruso, which we've been to a few times. I think that one actually, that had a little pop-up shop. I don't know if you remember when we went to Decathlon, there was a little pop-up shop near the KFC.
Wait, what?
In Decathlon in Rome.
Yeah.
Not near Italy.
Okay.
The other Decathlon. Kind of near the Appian Way. There's the big Decathlon store.
Yeah.
And then if you go outside, there's that little shack, that little stall, basically. And it's like a rotating thing. It was like, I think the first time we were there, it was like some sort of sushi restaurant or something like that. And then the second time we were there, it was I Caruso, which is a gelato chain. I have no recollection
of any of this.
Okay, so it did not make an impression on Darcy, the same impression it made on me. I thought it was actually quite good.
I'm sure it was wonderful.
That one, I believe, isn't so much a chain as there are a couple I Caruso in Rome as well. I think there's a few like 2 or 3 locations.
The big chain, whose name I always forget, but has lovely gelato.
Yeah.
Is that Fatamorgana?
No.
No.
That is La Romana, I believe.
La Romana. They are great.
Gelateria, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I would say that they're not probably as good as the smaller places in their... I don't want to say that.
No, I mean, we like them because I think we have a fit, like fondness, because the first time we went to Rome, we happened to be staying near one, and we didn't go in actually thinking like, I mean, there's no line outside. I was like, I'm not going to go in there. And then I think came back at like 4:00 and there was a line around the block. Yeah. And we're like, okay, did we just like miss out on going to this best? And I think actually we went, because the first time there was no COVID, and I could be wrong, but they were open 24 hours. That was their little shtick in where we were, because we joked about like basic acts, on the way to the airport, asking the taxi driver to drop us off. Like they do crepes in the morning. And getting a gelato on the way to the airport. And we didn't, but that one was really good.
They're really good, and I shouldn't say they're not as good as other places. I guess what I mean is that because they are a chain and they make really great, they have a high standard, and it is standard. Like, right. Most of all of their chains, all their little shops have the same flavors as each other, and they are wonderful, amazing flavors. They just aren't going to have that weird cucumber thing, right, or really obscure tiny batch, but it's still really, really wonderful. And I love the people who work there. The people who work in any gelateria are going to know what they're talking about. But I feel like the people there are really serious about their hard and soft gelato. Mm-hmm. And if you accidentally pick, 2 soft flavors, they will be very clear. They're like, that's maybe not a good choice. Maybe can I make a recommendation that we choose a hard one and then this, soft one on top. So they know a lot about what they do. That
was actually that happened to us. I ordered 2 flavors, and she was like, these are both soft. I was like, that's very cool. What does that mean? And she was like, these are both like soft serve. So if I put them together in a cone, it's gonna fall. Yeah. Like super soon. And actually she couldn't even get it over the counter to me. She's like, it's just too soft. She's like,
she was so kind though. She's like, I'm gonna try to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, it did not go.
And instead of she put it in a cup, instead of giving me the cup, she's like, you have to pick 2 other flavors. And I was like, can I just have the cup? I don't understand.
She's like, that's not possible. You can't eat that. No.
But I will say, actually, talking really quickly, because we did mention the hard gelato earlier and the soft gelato. That is where you'll find them. Where I guess you'll find the fact that they do put a little extra, maybe cream or eggs in it. But sometimes, I think once or twice, we've not in Rome though, but we've ordered gelato and gotten 2 flavors. And I think the first time we got like a weird look, but they were okay with it. And the second time, she's like, I can't mix those two flavors. She's like, I just can't do it.
She's very nice about it.
Yeah. So they're very, like Italians are very particular about their, I guess their flavor combinations.
Yeah. Which ingredients go with others.
Yeah.
And which flavors go together. Absolutely.
And they sometimes will not let you mix weird thing. Like if it's a really weird one with like one that might not go together, or if you're in one of those moods where you just want two wild, unrelated flavors, they might be like, I cannot in good conscience.
You might have to get two different cones.
Yeah, you might have to get two different cones.
Yeah, so that they don't mix. But just quickly, speaking of La Romana, they are the ones who at every one of their locations, you can get white chocolate or regular chocolate.
Yeah.
Sometimes dark chocolate. They coat the cone like
and
we were talking about
and
earlier.
they kind of coat the sides into the bottom.
Yeah. So that's really, really lovely.
Yeah.
And sometimes they will have odd flavors. Like they'll have a regular whipped cream.
Oh, that's true.
And sometimes they'll have like a different flavor. There was like a cinnamon one or something.
I think actually had. I'm spacing on the name. Should have looked this up before starting the podcast, but it's Zabaione.
That's what it was, Zabaione.
Which is egg yolk, sugar, and coffee for anybody. It's like a breakfast thing normally, but it's a really decadent.
Zabaione flavored whipped cream. So they have they're a high standard.
Yes, I think they're really good. They are. It's. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair. It's not bad. It's a chain, and it's not bad. It's sort of. I think we talked about Alice Pizza in our last one. It's the same thing. It's consistently good. It's probably not the best you'll ever have. I think La Romana is the same thing. It might not be the best you'll ever have, but it's genuinely very good and very consistent.
And it's absolutely worth getting a gelato there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think the last place, we've only been to it once, but it's Gracchi. And I think it's gelateria Gracchi or something. And I'll post that in the description. And it was good. It was good.
Where's Gracchi?
That's the thing.
I don't remember it.
I know. And we went
major gaps in my memory.
Well, only a gelato. She was focused on everything else. I can't remember where we went to it. No, now it sounds like we never went. But so we do these things. We go and we write down. Like we went to this place. It was good. But then we don't take any more notes. So we're like, oh,
we'll try to get better on that. Like we've said, that we're going back to Rome very soon. So
we might revisit this episode.
We'll revisit this episode potentially. We'll take better notes. Get back to all of you with all of the important things we've found out
and
missed. Yes. And all the things we didn't take notes on before.
Before we get to the very last section, which is pricing, which is very important to us, I wanted to give like a little fun mention to, it's not a gelato shop, but it's a cafe, and it's called La Casa del Caffè Tazza d'Oro. And it's just like a little coffee shop, just a little cafe. And a lot of people do this, but they're very famous for it. And it is a coffee, I mean, granita, basically. It's sort of like a slushy. And then sweet whipped cream. Then it's coffee granita. And then it's sweet whipped cream. And it's just it's like €3.
It's all in a cup.
It's all in a cup.
Yeah.
Not in a cone. It's just basically like, it's basically, essentially imagine a coffee shop wanted to get a little fancy. And that's what they did. And it became kind of famous for it. It's amazing. You have to pay to sit down there. So I don't recommend it. But it's €3. You can take it. You are 25 steps from the Pantheon, maybe even 15.
So just walk outside, you'll see the Pantheon,
and
have your little coffee granita.
Well, I was going to say, there's a little statue right in front of the Pantheon, and there's steps, and you can sit on the steps. There is a water fountain right next to the steps. You can fill up your water bottle, so you have a drink of water, you have a place to sit, you have a coffee granita thing and you're looking at the Pantheon. So if you're looking amazing. For like a more of a on a budget sort of.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
Yes.
It's a wonderful €3 experience. And I just want to be clear, I'm one of those people, I get really nervous in most situations, to be fair. I get really nervous when I don't know the rules, like entering any sort of business. But when I enter a restaurant and I don't really understand the flow or what I'm supposed to be doing, I get nervous. So just so you know, when you enter, you pay first. There's almost like a little hostess booth, and then past that, if you need it, there's a bathroom. But there's a hostess booth, you order and pay, and then they'll kind of direct you to your right, and then there's a big, sort of standard coffee bar, and you go and you take your little receipt and you show it to them and you wait there for your drink. And then you can take it outside, pay to sit if you want, or just take it out to the Pantheon. So that's how that situation works.
I think we mentioned that in the coffee episode. I could be wrong. In case you haven't listened to it, this is actually good information. But there are some of the places are different depending where you are. But basically, some of the cafes are you pay first, some you pay after. But yeah, that one is very much a pay first.
Yes.
And then sit second. So I guess on to prices.
Yeah, let's talk about how much things cost.
Well, let's just talk about how much gelato costs, because I don't know how much a house costs. And
okay, let's talk about how much gelato costs.
So the standard price for gelato in a cone with 2 scoops, and typically that means 2 flavors, is
$2.50.
$2.50. And that comes with cream, by the way. I only say that because other cities in other parts of Italy, the standard price is €2 with 50 cents for the cream. But in our experience, almost all of Rome adds the cream on, or they'll ask you if you want the cream, and they don't refund you the 50 cents. Yeah. So that's the standard. That's the absolute, like...
That's the regular, I'm a grown-up and I'm eating ice cream tonight.
Yeah. And sometimes you can say I want a gelato and they'll give it to you, but usually they'll ask you what size. And there's 3 standard sizes.
So there's piccolo, which is that, right? And then medio, which would be 3 scoops, 3 flavors. Does it go beyond that?
Yep.
It
4
does.
scoops, 4 flavors.
Who can manage that?
Who can manage that?
I mean, a god among people can manage that. But there's also the bimbo. Which is baby cone, and that's 1 flavor.
If you are one of those people who are looking for the best bang for your buck, I urge you to not go beyond piccolo, because the cone does not get bigger. Right, what happens is the ice cream kind of gets a little bit smaller. With the bimbo, you'll tell them I want 1 scoop, and they'll sometimes give you a big scoop.
Yeah. They're like, there's no way you only want 1.
Yeah, like
we'll put a little extra.
So like they'll hook you up.
But sometimes if you're an adult, they won't let you get the bimbo, but they will let you get 1 flavor if that's what you want. That's not typical, but I mean, just don't be surprised.
Well, as I say, you actually at Neve di Latte, my favorite place, that was something you asked for. Like, can I just I don't really want that much. Can I just get 1 scoop, 1 flavor? And they said no.
And that's why they're not my favorite.
That might be why they're not your favorite. So unfortunately, it's called the child's, like bimbo is children or child, the child's scoop. But it really is just for anybody who wants 1 scoop. You just want to, not even a taste. You want a little more than a taste, but a little less than a full cone to yourself. And that's, I think, kind of why those, sometimes people feel like you're like, trying to pull one over on them. But that's €150. And then $2.50, then $3.50, and grande is the biggest, $4.50. It's essentially, the math usually works out is €1 per scoop with 50 cents for the panna. And if the reason, I think I mentioned a few times, is like, I'll talk about price later, but if you're looking at more than that, if it's like maybe €3 for the piccolo, okay. But if they're talking €4 or €5 for a piccolo, that's like, you are so far in a touristy area. It's like,
I mean, unless you're getting gelato like inside the Vatican looking at the Sistine Chapel, it shouldn't cost that much.
It really shouldn't. Because some of the best gelato places really will be also like the cheapest, or at least in line with other prices. And I mean, again, it's not like you aren't necessarily looking at the Colosseum. You're not walking around with it, that's for sure. But I think it's also, for us, it's really one of those things of, I did mention obviously the Cafe Granita, but I think when we are enjoying gelato, we're just there to enjoy the gelato.
And I think that says a lot about this country, though. And it's something that I really love about this country, is that good food is expected. Good quality ingredients and care about the food is expected. And it should be affordable. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing. Like, I think affordable is the biggest thing. Like, everybody should be able to afford it. And part of it is, it's so classic to see old guys go for a gelato, either before aperitivo, before dinner.
Yes.
Kids, obviously, people, parents. I mean, everybody goes for a gelato and everywhere. It's so common to see.
One of my favorite sights is we walked outside of our apartment one time, and I think it must have been when one of the gelato shops was closing around lunchtime. This one closed. But there was a guy who pretty clearly had just been out, like he was off of work for the lunch hour, went to walk his dog, had a gelato by himself. He was just out there. The gelato shop was closing, and he was just enjoying his little cone, standing with his dog. It's amazing.
What is, and I think because it's like the same way we talked about coffee and coffee culture. It's like part of a life. You stop for coffee. I think gelato is such a part of the culture and such a life, which I think is why there is such a, I mean, I don't want to say snobbish culture around it, but people talk about wine snobs, this, that, the other thing. It's like, obviously there's a lot of history in wine. Obviously there's a lot of chemistry and this and that in wine. And I think for a lot of people, gelato is the same way because it's, it's not just, oh, we have ice cream and we like it. It's kind of like, we've been doing this for a long time. It's become part of who we are. So I think, I don't know, for me, it is very fun because you get to experience that because it's, I mean, I don't know. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've had an ice cream cone from an ice cream shop back where we live in the States, just because it's expensive. It's a super long line. It's, I mean, I don't really want to walk around with it. I mean, it's like all these issues. And then mostly because it's expensive, actually, if I'm being honest. So I think that's the big thing. I mean, I think that kind of ties up the episode of gelato. I mean, can you think of anything else?
No, but we will revisit if we find out any more important information when we go back.
We might just revisit if we've just for the heck of it, honestly. No,
just because you want to talk about gelato more.
It's funny. We've already recorded this episode once, and the last ending time was 22 minutes. This one is, I think, an hour. So
how did we only talk about gelato for 22 minutes? That's why we scrapped that episode.
I know.
What were we doing with our lives?
Now we know how to talk about gelato. So I think this also not only wraps up gelato, but I think it wraps up the food portion of our Rome podcasts. We talked about buying food. We talked about grocery stores. We talked about food markets. We've talked about restaurants, going out to eat. We've talked about coffee culture, drink culture, aperitivos. We've also talked about gelato. That pretty much wraps up food, drink, that kind of stuff in Rome. We haven't yet decided. I feel like we should have had a plan, but there's a few other things to talk about. I mean, tons to talk about, I should say, but a few things that we'd like to talk about sooner, such as used clothing markets, if that's something you are into, such as even things like packing for Rome, especially in the summer. There's a number of little things, so we haven't really decided what we're going to talk about next, but we do hope you'll be here for it,
and it will be soon. We're not going to leave you hanging again.
Yes,
for at least a little while.
Yeah, thank you guys so much though for listening and continuing to listen, and for showing us that at least some of you are enjoying it. We've received messages, and I think we just got over 1,000 all-time plays, which is very exciting. Very exciting. Because I think when we took a pause back in November, I think we had 70 or 80, maybe 100 plays all time.
Which was amazing. Very exciting.
Because I was more than one. We were like, oh my God. It's because we obviously listened to it ourselves to make sure it sounded okay through Spotify. So it was when I think we found out, it was like, wait, this has 2 listens. It was really big for us. So it's funny just to see it have exploded since we've been gone. Exploded in the sense that it went from 100 listens to 1,000 all time. So thank you guys so much. And that's because of you.
Thank you for listening.
We really appreciate it, and we hope you will join us next time.
Yeah.
All right. Have a lovely rest of your day.
I'm going to go eat a gelato.